Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the NESN Pregame Chat. I am Zack Cox, joined here, as always, by fellow Patriots beat writer Dakota Randall and former Patriots linebacker Matt Chatham. We are going to be previewing the Patriots Week 5 matchup with the Houston Texans. And coming into this game, really the biggest storyline is the players who will not be playing in this game for the Patriots. The Patriots have ruled out 4 of their starting 5 offensive linemen. No Mike Owenu, no Isaiah Wynn, no Shaq Mason, no Trent Brown. So the only familiar face you'll be seeing on this Patriots offensive line is center David Andrews. They're really going to have to be a lot of moving parts cycling in to fill out those other 4 spots. The Patriots elevated 3 offensive linemen from the practice squad yesterday to give that group some additional depth. And then over on the other side of the ball, the Patriots will be without starting cornerback Jalen Mills. Also will be without reserve cornerback Shaun Wade. So really some depth questions at those 2 very important position groups coming into this game. But we'll get right into our offense defense spotlight. Matt, offensively, what are you going to be looking for in this game from the Patriots with so many key players not available to be playing?
I've done run game enough for the last several weeks, so I love you guys kind of touch on that one if we go that direction. But I wanted to make sort of a global point here for folks that heard that piece of news about the 4 out of 5. I mean, one little, I guess, piece of perspective from having all these years of being around rosters and seeing guys up and down and the backups and sort of quality of backups and how they play typically. Usually the real gap between, say, like a Matt Meyer as your starter and then the guy that's behind him, it's the pass protection that really distinguishes between the 2 guys. I would be more concerned from a Patriots standpoint that you could sit back and protect a long time for Mac Jones. And that's kind of what I'll be looking for. You shouldn't assume that because a guy's a backup that he can't run block in the same sort of vicinity or similar competency. The real difference, why you have left tackles and they make so much money, is because the drop between their ability to hold up on a 5 or 6 second count in pass production and beat these big time defensive ends. That's the real disparity. It's less so on, pressing a defensive end that weighs about the same and creating a lane for a running block. It's not identical. I completely get that. And it is a guy by guy basis. But if you're out there trying to sort of figure out what in the hell are we about to see, the real drop off you usually see is pass protection, especially as Zach mentioned, you're pulling up guys off the practice squad that weren't necessarily working together as one sort of cohesive unit. It's much easier, and I'm speaking from youth football here, which is maybe not the best piece of symmetry, but when you haven't had them together, the things that are easier to put on paper and execute correctly, maybe not big plays, but are more direct ones and more stuff where you can get everyone going in one direction. You need some misdirection in the formation and the play calling and things like that, so it's not so deliberate. But you can do those without a dramatic fall off from the other crew. The tough part is, hey, we're going to live back here in the pocket and best of luck, Mac Jones. That's tough. So what I'll be watching is really for the things that I think have to happen in games like this where there's chaos. And it's just, we got to be honest, there's chaos. There's chaos on the Houston side. There's chaos on the New England side. I think it draws back to some of the things that I know Matt got a lot of praise for last week, his poise and composure to get through the game, to go toe-to-toe with, a really good program. I have to, again, sort of be sort of straight line with this. They also did score 17 points. So I think they've scored 17 points with a group they're a little less, drawing from this week with the O-line change. So I think they have to really, really be better and with things that they got away last week that didn't hurt them. The Jakobi Meyers near fumble, I've watched that thing 75,000 times now, and I still can't quite convince myself that wasn't a fumble.
He looked out there. Definitely looked out with that one.
He did. And Mac Jones had the really one bad pick. He got lucky a couple other times putting the ball in the defense's hands. So, yes, his stat sheet says, yes, he had 19 in a row and all that. And a lot of those are screens and checkdowns. And that's okay, too. It's not a bad thing. But I don't think you can necessarily pretend that these other things didn't happen once you rewatch the film. They were very fortunate that it wasn't a little uglier. So in saying that, he needs a clean sheet against Houston. When all these crazy things are going on, incompletions are good plays, right? I think he does have a bad habit here that's growing a little bit. The 4 sacks he took, I'd say only one of the 4 were of the variety where it's like, whoa, O-line, you just blew that one. He had other ones where certainly pressure is coming, but I think that the best distinction there in the game is Brady versus him, and you can't be Brady. I get that. But somebody's going to win. That's okay. And a pocket doesn't mean they're all 5-1. A pocket means that when one guy loses, you slide to the part that's still available. You keep the play alive or you kill it. And I think that's the thing he's struggling with a little bit right now. So in a game like this, where your defense is bound to play really well against the group across from you, you cannot take sacks. You can't on 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 5 take a 14-yard sack. You can't do that. You got to throw an incompletion because getting back to 3rd and 5 or 6 is still a win. So I think that's the thing that in today's game, offensively, just from sort of a view from 10,000 feet, they can't have negative plays. You can't give the ball to the other team. You can't have bad penalties, all the stuff we've been talking about. But Mac has to be a little more, I think, judicious with the way he handles the football and understand that on this particular day, maybe more so than others, you're not going to be chasing a 35-point score from the other side. You have to eliminate any mistakes on your end that might give them a possession or give them half the field. He has to be really, really smart with the football this week.
Yeah, and we should note that pass protection has been a pretty significant issue for this Patriots team, even when they have had most of their starting offensive linemen. They've allowed at least 10 or at least 9 rather quarterback hits in each of their 3 losses this season. Last week, the official number was 12, but it was closer to 15 with a couple plays getting called back for penalties. As you mentioned, some of that is on Mac Jones, but a lot of that is also on the guys blocking for him. So it's going to be very difficult for this team to improve in that area when you're integrating so many new players into that pass protection front. Dakota, offensively, what are you going to be looking for today?
Well, I think like everybody, I'm looking to see what happens on the offensive line because if that falls apart, there's not really going to be much else to watch, I don't think. But if it does hold up and the Patriots can get something resembling a passing game going, I'm looking at Kendrick Bourne. I think he's really coming on. 2 weeks ago, he had 5 receptions for 96 yards and a score. Last weekend, he had 5 catches for 58 yards. And it seems like he's really primed for a breakout. And Mac Jones really likes targeting him in big spots. And I think a great example was against the Buccaneers last weekend. I think it was the Patriots' first touchdown scoring drive. Early in that drive, you had a Mike Onwenu holding penalty that got the Patriots back in 2nd and 20. And who did Mac Jones go to? Kendrick Bourne for a 16-yard gain. Fast forward on that drive a few plays, another Mike Onwenu holding penalty. And I think they ran a run for like 1 yard, or it was a Jonnu Smith catch and run for like 1 yard. And the next play, 16 yards to Kendrick Bourne. I think he's fast. I think he's explosive. I don't know if he's as fast necessarily as maybe Nelson Aguilar, but I think he's probably the most athletic and potentially explosive wide receiver on the roster. And I think it's as Mac Jones gets further into the season, I think he's trying to find other go-to targets. Jacoby Myers clearly is one of those. He's very reliable, very dependable receiver. I think Nelson Aguilar still is finding his way. And I think so the same can be said for the tight ends. They looked better last weekend. Both got touchdowns. But I think, Mac is really looking for that second receiver that he can count on in a lot of situations or go to for a big play. And I think Kendrick Bourne is emerging as that player. And again, I just think he's got a skill set that could lend itself to some really big games in this Patriots offense. And if the pass protection holds up today, I think he could have another big game and just take another step towards becoming a real focal point of this offense. So again, if the pass protection plays well, I look for another sort of big performance with Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne.
Yeah, Bourne's certainly been productive over these last 2 weeks. It's really been him and Jacoby Myers carrying this Patriots passing game. And from that offensive line perspective, you're probably going to need to see a lot of quick passes from Mac Jones in this game. Doubt you'll see too many 5-7 step deep drops. And if you eliminate those, that doesn't really point toward a likely breakout game for Nelson Aguilar, since a lot of his production is on deeper passes and throws further down the field. So could definitely see another productive game from Kendrick Bourne in this one. For me, offensively, I'm going to be looking to the run game. I mean, the Patriots just have not been able to run the ball whatsoever these last 2 weeks. They averaged 2.9 yards per carry in that loss to the Saints back in week 3. And last week, they were the 4th team since the AFL-NFL merger to finish a game with negative rushing yards. They finished with -1 yards on 8 carries. Their longest carry of the game was actually a kind of a swing pass to Nelson Aguilar that counted as a run. But going back the last 2 games, their last 12 handoffs have gained 2 or fewer yards. So they really just have not been able to get anything done on the ground lately. And this was an area of the team that we expected to be a strength this year. Even without Cam Newton, you still have Damian Harris. You still have an offensive line that was supposed to be one of the best in the NFL. Now, we'll see in this game whether what you mentioned earlier, Matt, proves to be the case, whether it's easier to run the ball than to kind of pass protect when you have all these new offensive linemen working their way into the mix. I think they don't need to run for 170 yards in this game, but they need to establish something on the ground there, because they're making Mac Jones do too much lately. I went back and looked at it. He's thrown 91 passes over the last 2 games. Only Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger threw more during that span. That's not what you want for a rookie quarterback. Even though we like what we've seen from Mac Jones, he's definitely shown some positive things during his first 4 NFL starts. But at this point in his career, you don't want him throwing 80% of the time, 75% of the time. You got to get something done on the ground. You still have Damian Harris, who should be a productive rusher for this team, and then we'll see what the backup situation looks like in this game, whether that's J.J. Taylor again, whether that's Ramondre Stevenson getting back into the lineup. So I think the Patriots they need to improve on the ground. They can't have Mac Jones be throwing 40, 50 times a game if they want to have success offensively, because that's what's been happening. And they've only been able to put up 13, 17 points in these last couple of games. So that's what I'm really going to be looking for. Can they run the ball in this game against the Texans defense that, on paper, statistically, has been one of the worst against the run in the NFL this season?
Hey, Zach, real quick point on the running game as well. Something that shocked me a little bit. I wanted to go back and review this a little bit of what had been breaking down. And I know the offensive line is getting crapped on from 17 different angles, and 4 of those guys aren't playing today, as we mentioned. One of the biggest, most consistent breakdowns in the run blocking was actually from the receiver group.
Yep.
That's something they got to be much better in. A lot of missed blocks by Jacoby. I know he's been an excellent go-to guy in the pass game, but if they're going to pressure with corners, essentially blitz the run, the receivers have to block better. So they've been a big part of that breakdown formula. So they need to be better as well.
Yeah, you saw.
Yeah, I would add real quick on that. Yeah,
there.
I was going to say, I thought N'Keal Harry, he's someone who he's big, he's physical. In theory, he should be one of your best run blockers as a receiver. And he got ran over a couple times by defensive backs last weekend. And we've kind of seen that happen multiple times during his career. So I'd like to see him get more involved and have some success in run blocking, because he's got the body and seemingly the toughness to do it.
On a percentage basis, he wasn't anywhere near the problem. I know the play you're talking about, they went toss at him and his guy went across his face. It's been a little more of an issue on a volume basis with unfortunately Jacoby, which surprised me. And even Kendrick Bourne, who's kind of a dog.
Yeah.
He's really a tough guy, but he's missing. They're slipping blocks. So we just want to remind fans that the receivers are all collectively a part of the run game as much as just offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. You've seen some breakdowns from the tight ends in that area as well. So definitely something that the entire blocking unit is going to need to improve. Let's switch gears now, go over to the defensive side of the ball. As I mentioned off the top, the Patriots, no Jalen Mills in this game, no Shaun Wade, who I thought might have been a potential replacement for Jalen Mills at that outside cornerback spot. Now looking likely that we'll see Joejuan Williams in that position, and he was a healthy scratch last week. So it just kind of shows how dire this situation is at cornerback for the Patriots. Matt, defensively, what are you going to be looking for from New England in this one?
I'll be quick on this one. I think in the style of game that we sort of set up that we're expecting from the offense, defensively, you have to turn the ball over, right? You have to force turnovers. This can't be a game where you go equal possession. They get 14, you get 14. I think in this environment, especially against a rookie quarterback, that's an offense that has netted less than 300 total yards in 2 cum games. So adding the last 2 games together, they were like a 106 and a 190. So they've not been doing much. So I think you just need to steal back possessions for that offense that is in a transition stage here. The offensive line's all remade, as we mentioned. They've got to somehow find all the things we talked about. But the best way to do that is turnovers. This can't be a game where, say in the event that Mac does give it up once or one of the backs puts it on the ground, God forbid, because that has been an issue, you got to get some back defensively. They want to give it to you. They're an offense that will. And they've shown that against their last several opponents. But if you end up in a game where it's 0-0 and you're going even possessions on the road, that's not what you want to see.
Yeah, Patriots have lost the turnover battle in all 3 of their losses this season. So definitely going to be a point of emphasis for them in this game. Dakota, defensively, what are you looking for?
Well, if I'm the Patriots, really, there are only 2, maybe 3 players you need to worry about stopping. And I don't know if you've looked at the Houston Texans stats this season, but they're pretty funny. If you look at the receptions, Brandon Cooks has 28 receptions for 369 yards, and a touchdown. The next closest for receptions is David Johnson with 8. And Brandon Cooks has 39 targets this season. Next closest on targets is Anthony Miller with 11. So there's
and
one
Anthony
player
Miller
you
is
need
no
to
longer
stop
on
in
the
the pass
team.
game.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So there's one player you got to worry about. I have to believe the Patriots, who know how to defend Brandon Cooks, you'd think they had him in New England for a year there, that they should be able to figure that out, put J.C. Jackson on him, whatever it needs to be. And then in the running game, Mark Ingram has 171 yards and a score. I think the next closest is David Johnson with 66. Philip Lindsay's really was a non-factor. So you really only have to worry about starting Mark Ingram and Brandon Cooks, and then they should be fine. And I just look at it and say, yeah, I'm worried about the offensive line. Yeah, there's something with the Patriots I'm concerned with. But rookie quarterback, it's really about Mark Ingram and Brandon Cooks. You should be able to bottle up those players well enough to pull out a win today. I'd like to believe.
Yeah, J.C. Jackson basically confirmed this week that he will be covering Brandon Cooks in this game, which I don't think is any surprise, considering there isn't really anybody else in this Texans offense that sort of warrants his attention. So that'll definitely be a matchup worth watching. Defensively for me, Jamie Collins is back. He officially re-signed with the Patriots this week. Third tour of duty here in New England. Practice Thursday and Friday. Don't know if he'll be active today. Don't know if he is active, how active he will be, how much of a role he'll play in this Patriots defense. But this Patriots linebacking core overall, I think, has underperformed through 4 games. I mean, you've had a lot of injuries in that group. Kyle Van Noy, Jawan Bentley, Josh Uche, all have missed games, and Dante Hightower seems to be still working his way back up. They're managing his workload. He's been below 70% in playtime percentage the last 2 games. So this is a group that, outside of Matt Judon, hasn't really had a much top end production. It made sense that when Jamie Collins did become available, that the Patriots gave him a call and brought him back, because the Patriots, for whatever reason, they Jamie Collins, basically all of the best seasons of his career have come here in New England. Just was not the same player in Cleveland and in Detroit, but he's also going to be 32 years old in a couple of weeks. He really wasn't that productive over the second half of that 2019 season, which was his most recent season here in New England. So I'm going to be very curious, 1, to see what his role is in this defense, because he can play a couple of different roles, and 2, just how effective is he? Is he the same Jamie Collins that we saw here early in that 2019 season, or does he look old? Does he not have it anymore? I'm going to be really interested to see what number 58 looks like in this game.
Yeah, Zach, I'm really looking forward to seeing that too. And I just think we've talked about it a lot this season, where the Patriots don't have a ton of speed in linebacker. And I mean, I don't think Jamie Collins is as fast as he used to be. But he certainly brings, I think, enough to the table where they should be able to use him in enough situations and that he could make a difference. I still am looking for a big Josh Uche game. We talked about it going into the season. I know he's dealt with I think it was a back injury. But just, I think going into the year, we thought he would really pop by now and have a big game. And, he very well could. But I hope this doesn't make it prolong the Josh Uche breakout game, having Jamie Collins. And I still want to see something big from him.
Definitely saw some good moments from Josh Uche early in the season, but it certainly has not.
Yeah.
The breakout hasn't reached the level that I think some of us were expecting. But let's close out the show with our betting segment. The line has moved a little bit since yesterday in the wake of some of these injury updates. The Patriots were 9 point. I think it might have been as high as 9.5 earlier in the week. It is now down to 7.5. The Patriots are 7.5 point road favorites in this game. The over-under also dropped a tick from 39.5, is now down at 39. So, Matt, some dicey numbers here. So a very large road favorite, a very low over-under. Where are you leaning in this one? You keeping the unders train rolling?
I am. We're 4-0. Let's go 5. So I think the big issue here is just all that uncertainty. And I understand money movement, why the spread's coming down. That makes sense. But the idea for it to just tick down half a point, I mean, these are 2 offenses that let's look at Houston. 0 points and I believe 9 in 2 weeks of work. The Patriots at their absolute high bar have been at 25 on a road, and that was with the full offensive line. And a week ago, with a very vulnerable Bucs defense, they put up 17 at home. I don't know. Honestly, this could end up being a 13-6 kind of game. It could easily be a net. We've seen multiple net 33s out of this group anyhow. I don't understand how it gets there other than lightning strikes and crazy things happen in NFL football. But I feel like this is a week where they're giving us the under. We should take it.
Yeah. Dakota, where are you leaning here?
I've been doing all player props the last few weeks, and I'm staying that way this weekend. The Kendrick Bourne 29.5 reception yards. I think you alluded to it on Twitter, Zach. To me, that's a layup. 5 targets, combined 13 targets the last couple of weeks. Again, we talked about it, 96 yards and 58 yards. I just think over 29.5 should be a layup for him in this game. And also Davis Mills on the Texans side, over under 0.5 interceptions. I'm taking the over on that. No way he doesn't throw an interception in this game. That's a layup to me too.
Yeah, this is a big seeing ghosts type game, I think, for Davis Mills. I'm with you again this week, Matt. I like the under in this game. Davis Mills has started 2 games. As you mentioned, the Texans have scored 9 total points in both of those games. They actually looked decent offensively when they had Tyrod Taylor in there, but ever since they put in Davis Mills, haven't been able to move the ball, haven't really been able to do anything offensively. Patriots also haven't been able to score points this season, and they're without 80% of their offensive line. I like this game going under 39. I think you're going to see I'll say a defensive football game. I won't say an ugly football game, but it might be a little bit of both here today in Houston. That will do it for this week's NESN pregame chat. You can follow me on Twitter at Zack Cox NESN. You can follow Dakota at Dakota Randall NESN. You can follow Matt at Chatham 58. And you can follow along with all of our Patriots coverage, pregame, in-game, and postgame on NESN.com.